Andy Frankos, founder of Be Frank and host of Franc Talking, my newsletter that goes out on a regular basis. I'm delighted to welcome Mark Gilbert, who's one of my oldest friends. We've known each other for over 30 years. Back in the 90s, the glory days of Man United, where I used to always get top trumps over Arsenal back in those days, which are now sadly long gone. So I'll let Mark do an introduction for himself. But he's worked at the likes of News UK, the FA, Virgin. So he's got a wealth of experience across the sports marketing category, which is what we're going to jump into today. So I'll just hand over to Mark for an introduction, and great to have you, Mark.
Good to see you, Andy. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Mark. I'm the owner of First Team, sports marketing and technology consultancy. We work with brands and agencies to shape and build marketing strategies. Analytics, brands, content are kind of the core kind of services I offer as an individual, but I've got a network of other people, a ton of designers, a ton of website designers and builders and developers. And I don't have any staff. I am a network consultancy. So I work with best in breed consultants and freelancers. And basically when I win projects, I build the team to suit the brief. So it's all tailored to various clients.
Amazing. And you've worked on sports marketing campaigns like with AS Roma and Serie A.
So I'll give you a little quick career overview. I started as a picture researcher at News UK, and while I was doing my degree, I was lucky enough to work there. I had a degree in English language and communications. I always knew I wanted to write and be in the communications industry in some respect, and ended up being given a technology column to write at one of the News UK titles, as well as various sports columns. I said yes to everything, basically. Always had my head in a PlayStation, an Xbox, or the latest phone or whatever it was. So it's fortuitous that one of the titles that I worked for launched a technology column and needed someone to co-edit that. So I became the youngest columnist at News UK at the time, at the age of 23. But was also working on the sports desk and was able to interview, various footballers, largely footballers, a few rugby players, some athletes. And what was quite nice was at the time, these athletes were starting to promote technology products and services. So it was serving both of my interests. I could get the interview with, the football star who was happening to be promoting a phone or a PlayStation at the time. And, the phone or the PlayStation bit could go on the technology page, and the interview could serve the sports desk. So yeah, did that, went to the Sun after that. Spent 5 years there, running that, the digital sports desk, introduced things like the UFC. So this is back in 2007. So I like to think ahead of, where certainly the UFC has gone. Really always been interested in combat sports. 5 really, really happy years there, and then left to become the FA's first head of digital. Brought social media, video, editorial for the website, and even matchday programs all together. Spent 4.5 years there. Did a couple of World Cups, Women's World Cup, Men's World Cup, a Euro, the 150th anniversary of football in 2013, which was a calendar year of fantastic events. A FIFA gala dinner with Sepp Blatter at the time. A football match in the grounds at Buckingham Palace. Met Prince William. Which was a highlight. So really, really good times at the FA. And then went out as a freelancer for a bit. Wanted to try my arm just on my own and work with a couple of great agencies. Ended up leading the content team at the Open Golf Championship in 2017 at Royal Birkdale. Still one of my career highlights. Got recruited in again to Virgin to help launch Virgin Bet on their launch team. Couple of years there. Sports betting, really, really psychologically really interesting how that all works, and you learn tons commercially. That was kind of why I wanted to move into that for a little bit. but then left to go out full time as a consultant. So 5 years now, I've been cracking away, over 5 years, and have had the privilege of working with the likes of, you know, FIFA and UEFA, Live Golf, the Saudi Football Federation, Arsenal, AS Roma, Team GB, a load of really innovative sports technology startups as well. So it's been really, really varied. So yeah, and here we are today.
Fantastic, Mark. Thanks so much for the overview. And you have a wealth of experience across a wide range of sports. I will do my best to expand outside the realms of football, but
Yep.
yeah, we will see how it goes. So, I mean, sports marketing has evolved significantly since you and I like left university, right? And we got into
Yep.
our first roles. It's been something that's been around for decades. We remember, well, we don't remember, but George Best was promoting sausages in the late 60s. And then obviously FIFA I think it was probably from 1974 onwards for the World Cup in Germany, started to get a lot more advertisers on board. We see the likes of Coca-Cola, McDonald's as well being FIFA World Cup sponsors. How has sports marketing evolved from that kind of 60s period up until the digital age around 2000, and then obviously the introduction of social media? You've got a lot more exposure to talent. How has things evolved from kind of that first kind of example that I mentioned to the kind of latter day?
If you go back to sports marketing's the kind of advent of sports marketing, really a lot of people pin that back to Mark McCormack and his relationship with Arnold Palmer, which was back in the late 50s, if I recall rightly, and was pretty much how IMG, which is the biggest sports marketing agency in the world, one of the agencies that I work with in recent years, and a great place to work. But that's pretty much how they started. So this has been around for, as you said, decades and decades, 50, 60, 70 odd years. But the evolution of it, certainly since you and I have been, we've had 20-year careers so far, 25-year careers so far. The biggest shift that I can see, certainly from a content perspective, is the amount of channels now at our disposal versus, what might have been available, even 20 years ago, is enormous. It's almost limitless. I think the biggest thing in that area is that potentially resources for a lot of brands haven't necessarily kept pace with the amount of channels that are opening. Back in when I was at the Sun, we had Twitter as was, and we had Facebook pages as well as the website and the physical paper, and we were launching a mobile app and an iPad app. That was pretty much it. When I went to the FA, we launched Instagram, we launched Snapchat, we launched, if you remember, Vine, if you remember, Meerkat. Yeah, loads and loads of different channels. We had the physical program. We had, I was looking after content for the big screens at Wembley Stadium, externally and internally within the bowl. Now you're looking at TikTok, you're looking at LinkedIn. There's a piece of work I'm doing for a client at the moment who are interested in opening up on Blue Sky. Now, the reality is there are finite resources at any brand, and there are only so many channels that you can look after before it becomes unmanageable. And there's nothing worse in marketing than an unloved channel, something that hasn't received any posts on it for 6, 7, 8 months. And that happens a lot. So the shift towards social was huge. The 2000s, when social really kind of started to kick in. I think also brands moving more towards a global outlook rather than a local outlook. Sports orgs certainly can't just serve their local fans anymore. They've got to deliver content to those, far and wide. There are football fans around the world. You're a United fan. I'm an Arsenal fan. It isn't just London and England where Arsenal fans, live and support the team. They are a global brand, and certainly even more so for United. And this also is reflective as you come, down the chain. AS Roma, which we might come on to later, one of my old clients with IMG. Huge following in places like Brazil and Japan. If you remember Nakata, the great Japanese from back in the day, like that really helped them resonate there. Brazil, they've had obviously Cafu, they've had Aldair, they've had some really Alisson as well at Liverpool, you know, the Liverpool goalkeeper now who's ex-Roma. So they've been able to develop those fans in those territories, and those fans want, you know, content for them. You know, brands now they can have direct relationships at the touch of a button, whereas, you know, certainly prior to social media, that wasn't possible. And we're talking 20 odd years, really. That's a huge leap. There's a bigger focus now on fan engagement and personalisation. I remember being at the FA, and some work was going on, you know, over a decade ago in the realm of personalisation, but it was quite limited, and that was largely due to the technology. But, you know, now we're seeing far better content tailored to suit user preferences. That's on websites. That could even be via algorithms on social media. You know, that is also making it tougher for brands to kind of get the relevant cut through that they want. If you think back in the day, followers was the kind of holy grail of social media. How many followers have you got? Oh, you've got more than you. That means, you know, you're better than me because you've got more followers. Well, that, you know, that's naive now. Nobody really should be counting followers. If you look at a platform like TikTok, it doesn't completely shun followers, but it certainly like is a less valuable metric on a platform like TikTok, because that For You page is serving you more and more content that it thinks you'll like based on your previous engagements, and it's learning. So these algorithms are really super sophisticated now. So your TikTok page is going to look very, very different to mine, which will look very different to, you know, person X, Y, and Z. So I think, the channels and the level of sophistication, the personalization aspect is perhaps the biggest leap, and that's only going to become, you know, even more sophisticated in the next kind of 5-10 years.
Amazing. Thanks, Mark. That's really insightful. And we will get into AS Roma, we'll get into measurement, and we'll get into channel selection as well. So your time at News UK and any football clubs or any sports clubs or players, athletes that you were working with, how difficult was it for those organizations or teams to embrace digital? There was for example, I remember there was a famous, I won't mention, but there's a famous journalist who was on Twitter at the time who would just speak into a vacuum and not respond or engage with anyone, right? That's just one kind of example, but like, how difficult was it to get brands to understand this digital kind of space and to embrace these new channels?
I would say I won't use the News UK days as the example, because it's a slightly different angle. With News UK, with those titles, we're often either grabbing players in a mix zone or at a press conference, or, you know, you're arranging an interview. So it's kind of like predefined already. There is an expectation. There are certain things that, you know, clubs have to put a manager up or a player up as part of a broadcast deal, for example. Where I think it was more interesting was when I went to the FA, and, you know, you're dealing with, you know, the best England players around, right? So the likes of a Wayne Rooney, a Steven Gerrard, that sort of caliber of player, John Terry, you know, Rio Ferdinand, that sort of level. It was interesting because there was internally, social media was still kind of kicking off, and the website was becoming more of an important thing at the FA. And we had some really progressive leaders at the top of the FA. The CEO at the time, Alex Horn, really progressive. My old boss, Adrian Bevington, comms director, and the guy who pretty much ran the England part of the FA, he was the managing director there. Really, really progressive, understood the media really, really well, understood the value of social media, and kind of understood where it could go as well, but also was very, very conscious of the risks of, you know, the slightest tweet being even slightly misworded that could be picked up by a journalist from a tabloid and twisted, and that creates a comms issue. So there was an incredible amount of work that needed to go in to convince people internally at the FA that what was going to grow the FA brands, and by that was the England brands, the Lionesses, which, you know, that was being thought of and was launched, and we developed, you know, the Lionesses brands during my time at the FA, and it's gone on to even, you know, massive success since then, with the success that the girls have had on the pitch, and everything that Serena Wiegman has done and her predecessors. But convincing people to trust the internal media team, which is effectively what we were, and that if anything dodgy at all was said, we would take that out in the post-editing, in the post-production. That was incredibly challenging to do. And I had an excellent team of video editors, video producers, social media producers, really good content team I had at the FA. I inherited some good people. I added to that, brought everything together. And, you know, a lot of them are still there at the FA and have excellent relationships with players now, and managers who are there, and ex-managers, you know, the likes of a Gareth Southgate, for example. And that's been built up over years and years of trust, and it just takes time. So my first kind of, I guess, year, 18 months at the FA, it was a slow burn, because you're doing small things, but you're demonstrating that you can be trusted with the small things. And then slowly but surely, you get the bigger things. So you get the interview with Pep Guardiola, which I arranged when he was on his sabbatical and he was living in New York. You get the interview with David Beckham, and you're trusted to present these super high profile individuals, really important people, massive names in sport, in the right way. One, you can be trusted in front of them. Two, you can be trusted to present them in the right way in the post production side of things. And it is just a slow burn. We got there in the end. There were a lot of people at the FA at the time who'd been at the FA a long time and couldn't really understand why this was needed. You know, like in many governing body organizations, people have been there 10, 15, 20 years in some aspects. But when you've got the support of progressive leadership like I had, and you're trusted to get on with it, and my media background was hugely beneficial because I understood it from the other side. So I could spot what would a Sun journalist see in this piece, and how could they twist it to editorialize that headline and create a potential comms issue.
Yeah,
going, you know, poacher turned gamekeeper effectively was what I'd become. That was hugely important, and I think a massive benefit to me. But it just takes time. You can't walk into a place and go, we're going to do this wacky video, we're going to have this player doing that straight away, because you need to build a relationship not only internally, but you need to build the relationship with the players. And the best sports teams have those long-term embedded content teams who've won the trust of the players. You can see it now more and more, certainly in football and even in rugby. You know, I was doing some work with Premiership Rugby last year. Players are trusting those faces, those familiar faces that they see every single day. They see you every single day, Andy. They'll say, "Hey, Sandy, he's all right, you know, give him a little fist bump, give him the time of day." If it's someone they don't know from an outside, you know, third party, and you're asking them to do something that's completely alien to them, they're going to shut you down. They don't need to do this stuff. They don't have to do this stuff. Their own channels are often bigger than, you know, the governing body channels or the brand channels that they're working for in a lot of cases. So it's a slow burn, and it's working with people, gaining the trust, and building those relationships. That's where it all starts.
On that point of trust, so I think that's essential, because there was an example, and again, I won't name the publication. I remember speaking a few years ago. He was chief sports writer. He was near his retirement. This must have been 2011, 2012. We were just chatting. His daughter lives on the street near us, so it was just chatting there. And he said to me about digital and the conflict that they would have in the sports room with the digital team. And again, this is some time ago. His team was going to interview Sir Alex Ferguson in 2 weeks' time, and the digital team put out a piece of content around 10 reasons why Fergie isn't the best manager of all time. So there was no synergy between the two entities. And he ended up having a row with the digital editor because it was like, my team are going to go and interview him. His PR team are going to say, well, why did you publish this? And kind of the response, I mean, like you said about the followers and things have evolved. It gets clicks. It'll get clicks. People will come in. They'll be more enraged. They want to come in and then leave a comment. They'll be exposed to ads. So I do 100% agree with you. It is that trust, and things have evolved significantly, especially at this publication. Um, but did you ever find that type of kind of misalignment in terms of what the content strategy was for the digital team versus what you were doing when you were interviewing kind of talent?
Totally. Certainly at News UK, certainly at the Sun, that was definitely a thing that was going on prior to my arrival. One of the reasons I got brought across to the Sun by my old sports editor, who was made head of sport at the Sun, and he was very much looking after the physical print side of things, but he was overseeing the digital side. But I think he would even admit, and we're still friends to this day, he's, you know, someone who I will always owe massively for the career that I've had, because he set me on the path. But he let me just oversee, you know, the day-to-day digital operation on the sports desk, and I had a guy above me who was the guy going into the meetings, almost like the executive digital sports editor. Another great guy who I'm doing a project with at the moment. But prior to that kind of trio being in place, what was happening was you almost had two distinct titles. You had you know, the Sun newspaper, and you had the Sun online, and very few conversations were taking place between the two teams. Now, from an external perspective, you know, me and you would look at this and go, well, the Sun newspaper and the Sun online are the same thing, like most people, because it's got the same logo. But internally, that wasn't the case. And that happened a lot. And one of the reasons I was brought across by my old boss was to have those internal conversations and say, right, what is that exclusive, you know, interview that is happening in 2 weeks' time with a David Beckham, that means that we can't write this stuff, you know, a listicle, for example, online. And again, this is just the internal comms in any organization often gets overlooked and is often bad. And if you can address that, and it's easy to address, it's literally getting up, going over and speaking to people. It isn't texting them, it isn't sending them a WhatsApp or an email, it's getting up and speaking to them. So there's no room for, you know, misunderstanding nuance or language or tone. You can do it face to face. Video calls are all very well, but it's nothing better than getting up and just walking over to someone and having a chat. And we were able to kind of cuff a lot of that really, really quickly, because we were having daily conversations with, we're thinking of doing this. Have you got anything coming up that means that, you know, this might affect what you're doing on the print side? And ultimately, if you think back to when I was at News UK, the print side of things was still bringing in the bulk of the money. You know, the website was making decent cash, the app was making decent cash, but the physical newspaper was the thing that was selling and bringing in the money. And you have to protect that. You had to protect that at the time. Things have obviously shifted now, and that is one of the reasons I got out of the industry, was because I call it like a sunset industry, right? Print journalism for me is on the decline, and the numbers are there. It is on the decline, right? But you know, when we come on to the discussion later about how you might get into journalism, how you might get into sports marketing, I think the skills that journalism teaches you, those communication skills, asking questions, finding things out, not having to be told everything, going and finding out, putting yourself, you know, in difficult situations where you have to find things out and ask questions. That is a really, really good tool for anybody to have in any industry, but certainly in sports marketing, because communication is absolutely essential for all of that. So I think there's far less of that now. I think in the media, there's far less of that now, because, you know, certainly digital and online is more where things are at. I certainly think with, you know, younger generations coming through, like, I mean, God, I haven't bought a newspaper in years and years. I think when the Queen died, I bought a few, because it was, you know, quite nice to have those memorial copies of someone who was, you know, always around in all of our lives. But other than that, I genuinely can't remember buying a newspaper for years and years and years and years and years. You know, what are our kids going to be doing, you know, when they're in their 20s? who knows? Like, could be, I mean, it'd be amazing to see. And I think this is one of the things that we as an industry of marketers need to be conscious of. We need to look at what 16 and 17-year-olds are doing digitally. How are they engaging with content? How are they consuming media today? How are they interacting with brands today? Because it's going to be very different to how you and I, and we're not old, like we are older, but we're not, I wouldn't consider us old, but we are certainly older. It's going to be massively different in that 20-year gap between us, you know?
Oh, I mean, 100%. Like we entered kind of the workforce at the cusp of like digital, where obviously there was. I mean, when did I start? Like, so I finished in university 2004. Went in, and there's like you were looking at web content, video, because I was working at the time for like an educational resource provider, and you're trying a lot of things. Obviously, you had MySpace, Bebo, you had uh, what was it, Friendster as well,
Yeah,
that was
yeah, yeah.
the social media, and then like Facebook, what was it, launched 2004, 5,
Yeah.
and Twitter in 2006. So yeah, I mean, we were right at the infancy, and to be honest, I think this is where we are right now with AI as well. It was just on the, you had the dodgy Spider-Man dancing gifs, and you were like, oh, this is amazing, like the turn of the century, and like obviously the evolution to what you can do now is like night and day. And I think where AI is as well is what we can see. So what we see right now is going to look very different in a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. So okay, so let's have a look and see as well about how brands approach sports marketing. Um, how would you identify like synergy between a brand and a potential partner? I'm sure you get part of like the pitches from football clubs, from like organizations like for tennis or for golf. But how do you align how suitable a partner would be for a brand? Kind of the first step that you would take.
Yep. So I think there's a good example back from my days at Virgin Bet when I was on their launch team, looking after content and some of the partnership activity. We'd done a load of research on different sports. We were getting offered all sorts of sponsorship opportunities with massive football clubs, even stadiums, and a lot of it, we worked with a really smart agency to kind of sense check a lot of these offers that were coming in. And where we kind of arrived was a lot of this was just vanity. It was going to be put in the Virgin brands, in places that would have a little bit of there's Virgin, but actually no real cut through. There was kind of a bit of a sea of sameness. Certainly from a gambling perspective, there's a lot of gambling brands in football, as we know, and that is increasingly coming under more and more scrutiny. There are going to be significant changes over the next kind of year, 2 years, where that's going to be less prominent in certainly Premier League. But we did another piece of work and thought, right, outside of football, where else is the opportunity? And we arrived on combat sports. And we had some really good discussions with some boxers and the UFC and some other smaller MMA brands, but the UFC was one that we really looked at. And in terms of boxers, we were talking to someone. There were two. There was one. These are both well-known boxers. I won't reveal the names, but they're big names. And one of them had what was brought to us as an opportunity, that this person had some quite serious mental health challenges and had some other challenges in his life, that when you actually understand gambling and the laws around gambling and how you're allowed to promote, and the regulations in gambling are incredibly high. They're as high, if not higher, than the financial services industry. It was very easy to shut that conversation down within probably an hour of it being brought to us, because we were able to say, look, this particular individual has had various mental health challenges, and if we are using that person as a brand ambassador, we are effectively breaking, gambling regs. We can't do this, and actually we shouldn't do this. More importantly, we shouldn't do this. There was another individual who was super clean, had never had any mental health challenges, had never done any drink or drugs, and was more in tune or more aligned to the Virgin brand values at that particular time. And we got quite far down the road with this individual to bring them on board as a brand ambassador. And for different reasons, it didn't happen. We actually rode back and withdrew for different reasons that I won't go into. But ultimately, what you want to try and do, the best partnerships are the ones that align with the values of each of the parties, right? You want a good brand coming in to part with the money, whose values are reflective or similar of the entity that they're trying to sponsor. And I think a really good example of this is Barclays. So if you think back in 2019 or prior to 2019, sponsorship of women's football, certainly in the UK, was not particularly, the investment wasn't huge. In 2019, for the 2019-2020 season, Barclays came in and they kind of went all in. They put in a significant amount of money into the WSL, and they've renewed it. I think it was last year they renewed another £45 million multi-year deal. And as a brand, if you look at the Barclays kind of brand values, if you dig them out online, they want to, one of their brand values is looking to create opportunities for its customers. It's quite a simple thing to say. We want to create opportunities for customers. We're a financial brand, we want to create opportunities for customers. Great. And in the narrative, when they've been talking about their relationship with the WSL and the Barclays WSL, they've said that they want to help create opportunities for girls and women in football that might not have been there without that £45 million investment or that multi-million pound investment. So the strategy from Barclays entering into women's football is reflective of their existing brand values. So there's a nice alignment there. I think that is one of the best ones. There are, again, you use the gambling example, use the gambling industry as an example. There are other ones where, clubs often further down the chain, doesn't have to be football clubs, it could be any kind of sports property, who might be struggling to make ends meet, will just take any sponsor because the cash sometimes is too good to turn down. That's the reality. I think everyone kind of understands that and appreciates that. Sometimes it is just right, we'll take that 1 year deal because the cash is too good to turn down. There are other ones that I'm aware of. There was one famous one in golf where a particular brand decided to sponsor a golf tournament. This is quite a few years ago, purely because the owner of the brand was a golf fan and the course was about a mile from his house. And he just thought, look, it'd be quite nice to sponsor, we'll get some hospitality out of this. There's a bit of kind of brand awareness, but actually I really like golf. I've got the money, I'm going to do this. So sometimes you see these kind of weird ones come up as well, which happen, right? People want to just get involved in sport. They've got the money, like, fine. It kind of suits those parties from that perspective. But I think the best one, if you go back to that Barclays example, I think those long-term relationships are the ones that, really do kind of have the most cut through and are the best ones.
Yeah, definitely. And you touched on a couple of interesting points. So with the Virgin scenario that you spoke about, there was a particular talent boxer that the brand values aligned with what Virgin had. And how do you determine that, just from seeing how the talent goes about their everyday life? How do you determine how collaborative those values are with the athlete?
Just by, you need to meet them, but you need to observe them as well. So how are they in the media? So for example, with Virgin, one of the brand values was they have like a playfulness about them. Virgin, they're cheeky, but they're not mischievous. Whereas if you compare, certainly in the gambling sector, if you look at a brand like Paddy Power, brilliantly done over the years. they have a head of mischief, right? So they're a mischievous brand, and they play up to that brilliantly, and no one does it better. When we were at Virgin trying to get Virgin Bet out the door, we knew we could not compete. We would be silly. Certain betting brands have tried to compete with Paddy Power and failed, like really, really badly failed, because they're not credible, they're not as authentic, and they've not been doing it as long as Paddy Power have. The Virgin brand is not mischievous, but it is a little bit cheeky, and it's a little bit daring. You go back to the days of Virgin Branson with the ads against British Airways. BA can't get it up, for example, when the British Airways fleet were grounded for different reasons, and Virgin Airlines was taking some of their customer base. So they are a cheeky brand, but there's a difference, I think, between cheekiness and mischievousness, and you need to kind of put those guardrails around, your brand, and like, this is what we are and this is what we're not. And then you kind of apply those guardrails to the ambassadors that you're going after. So this particular boxer was a little bit cheeky, certainly wasn't, mischievous, but there were a few things that he'd said in the media which were a little bit cheeky. So we could literally just do, start to apply some of those principles to this particular individual, and you end up with, look, he's brand safe, a little bit cheeky, presents himself well, very, very professional, kind of person in his outlook. And that was it, really. Like, you need to put some logic around it. You can't just make this stuff up, but you work really hard with the Virgin brand team, the internal Virgin brand team. Virgin's a really interesting organization, because you have kind of the Virgin, almost like imagine like the hub, and then the different spokes off it. You've got these Virgin license the brand into different industries. So you've got the airline, you've got the Virgin Money as the bank side, you've got Virgin Bet, Virgin Media. There's a ton of them, but everything goes through that central brand and has to be signed off by that central brand team, and they're excellent. Like, you learn so much working with incredible people there. And you sense check it, right? So this isn't like one person making these decisions. We're saying, right, we've got the potential to work with this football club or this particular athlete. We think that this person makes sense and this one doesn't. What do you think? And the guardians of the brand internally at Virgin are the real, people who give the sign off. So there is a lot of checking. Again, it goes back to trust, right? You're putting ideas forward that are credible and are realistic for that particular brand that you're working with. Because if you're not, then you're just going to be laughed out, aren't you? Like, it has to feel right for that particular brand. So anyone coming to a brand with a potential ambassador needs to, or should really have these sort of thoughts before they go in and pitch.
Yeah, okay. No, it sounds. Let's use a hypothetical example then as well, and I want you to shoot me down for my suggestion. So you're like chief growth officer, and partnerships is under you, a company, and I come to you. Say we're in fintech, and it's not gambling, it's fintech, and I say to you, right, I've spoken with Vinicius Junior's agent from Real Madrid. We want to grow in LATAM, and we believe that he is a great ambassador to promote our product through his own socials, through some TV spots. We're going to have all of this. It costs X amount. How would you approach that? What questions would you fire back to me that I need to make sure that I put in the proposal to you? And yeah, just very keen to see if somebody came with that idea, and kind of rather than a fully fledged one, just coming to you and saying, like, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? How would you approach that?
I think my first question would be, what makes Vinicius Junior credible in that space? Has he done anything? Has he ever spoken about financial investments or fintech or anything? Is there anything you can find that gives him or makes him appear authentic in that space? I think if you look at, it's really interesting. So again, sort of maybe 7-8 years ago, with influencers as we know them today, right? Because let's be honest, influencers back in the day were the newspaper columnists, right?
Yeah,
Influencers is not a new
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
They're not a new thing. This is just a
definitely.
rebadged type of influencer. But there were certain influencers, high profile influencers, who are still active today and have made a ton of cash, and fair play to them. But they would put their name to absolutely any endorsement, right?
Yeah,
And again, the work we were looking at Virgin Bet, when we were looking at our influencer strategy at the time, we decided to go down a micro influencer strategy rather than the big ones, because what we found with some of the big ones, and this goes back to the Vinicius Junior point, is they're going to have lots of brand partnerships in place. And if those brand partnerships don't feel, you think about the feed, right? A lot of this content is going to come through social feeds. So Vinicius Junior is known for, you need to analyze his channels and what has he done before? What are his existing endorsements? What does he like doing in his own life? What's he interested in? If you then get an advert that is completely out of kilter with everything else that he's doing, it will jar in the feed, and of course it will receive engagement because it's Vinicius Junior and he's got tens of millions of followers on the various platforms that he's on. But engagement is not the end goal here, right? It has to be the right type of engagement, because I can kind of take this to a slightly different tangent. So the year before I was at the Open, the biggest, when we were looking back and kind of trying to establish some benchmarks on what success would look like for the year when I was there, the biggest performing piece of social content was a retweet from Niall Horan, who obviously, Andy, you would know this, being a One Direction fan.
I mean, there's the posters all up here that you can't see.
Absolutely. So Niall Horan actually genuinely is like a big golf fan. Like, if you look at his social feeds, he plays, he has good friendships with some of the big golfers, like Rory McIlroy and him are good mates. So there's authenticity there, right?
Yeah.
He retweeted something that the Open did in 2016, and it just, all the One Directioners are kind of leaping on and retweeting and sharing this post, and it went absolutely mad. Did it actually change anything for the Open whatsoever?
Yeah.
No. Didn't do a thing. Did not do, and they proved this. They did some extra work on this. Did it tangibly impact, the amount of young people coming through the door for the following year's Open? No. Did it really kind of see more engagement with young people, post that particular tweet? No. So you've got to be careful with this stuff. It needs to be authentic. It needs to feel right. And again, you can look at someone like Cristiano Ronaldo. I mean, go through some of his feeds.
Yeah, I was going to say, with
there's a lot of stuff on there that just jars and does not work. And it's getting the likes. It's probably getting the odd comment, like the goat emoji or whatever. But as the brand, like, what is that actually doing for you? Personally, I don't think it does anything. Is there probably maybe a bit of brand awareness, but that recall after kind of 3 to 6 months, is it going to be there? Probably not. Again, you need to, a social feed, there is trust built between the athlete or the brand with the follower. As a follower, you're signing up because they do certain things and they're posting about certain things that entertain you. Largely, like, we follow people because we like them, they entertain us, we learn from them. Some people do follow others because they have a completely different opinion, and that's quite nice to have that balanced sort of feed, so you're getting different sides of a story that's probably a bit more newsy rather than from an entertainment perspective. But with the Vinicius Junior example, has he any credibility in the area? If not, can you create something that gives him a semblance of credibility in that area prior to the partnership being launched? And ultimately, is he the right guy? Are there other people from that kind of LATAM area who have spoken about fintech or have an interest in investment or whatever it is, who might be better brand advocates for that particular brand?
Sounds like I've got a bit of work to do on my pitch, so I think I'll go away and have a look. But in terms of audience and alignment of the audience and what you're trying to do in this example, Vinicius Junior and Latam, I've used tools like SimilarWeb in the past to see if there's some overlap between what the audience likes. How important is that? And also, what tools would you use to get kind of more audience information? And it could be own platforms, it could be third party. How would you go about finding out audience information to see whether that partnership is a good fix?
So there's obviously a lot of tools. You've named a couple of them. I remember being at Roma, and other clients that I've worked with have used this particular tool, but Blinkfire is a very good and well-established sponsorship tool. There are others on the market as well. Blinkfire is one that comes to mind at the moment. There's Spike, a more recent one that I've been dealing with. But I think where I saw this done really, really well was at Roma. They had a few really, really smart people, business strategists, the CRO, senior people in the commercial team, all coming together and looking at the data from what they could scrape from their website and their app, what they could get from social that was meaningful, what they could get from broadcast deals around the world where Roma were being screened, ticket details, home, away, European matches abroad, etc., etc. And they had a huge spreadsheet of various different data points that was all coming together, and they landed on a series of markets that, without overlaying all of that data in one giant document, and it was a fantastic document, but without doing that, they were going to continue to be working in silo, and digital team would be pursuing audiences over here because we think that's the right thing to do, and the commercial team are pursuing audience over here because we think that's the right thing to do. But these collective brains over there all came together and built this kind of shared document. And one of the territories that they landed on, that they were going to go after, was Japan. And you might think, goes back to my point previously about, Roma having one of the greatest ever Japanese players on their books 20 odd years ago with Nakata.
Yeah.
But you might think in the modern day, like, why Japan? Like for a team like Roma, who are, they're not one of the top three teams. They would admit that themselves. You've got Juventus streets ahead of everyone else, the 2 Milan clubs, and then Roma are probably like the fourth team really in Italy at the moment. And they landed on Japan as one of their key territories. And what they did was they started to create localized content in Japan, but they actually held 2 games in Japan. At the back end of 2022, they took the team, because a lot of the, unfortunately, a lot of the Roma players weren't actually going to the Qatar World Cup. I think 3 or 4 might have, but most of them weren't actually appearing. So they could actually take most of the first team squad to Japan. They played these 2 matches at these big stadiums, and they sold them both out. And as far as I'm aware, there are plans to go back and do more. They sold a load of merchandise. They obviously, used the Nakata, kind of the legacy stuff from Nakata's time there, and him just genuinely being an absolute world star. And it made a ton of sense, and it worked really, really well. And that was a really, really good example of everything being joined up from a content perspective, from a marketing perspective, a ticketing perspective, an events perspective, merch, just really, bringing all of those data points together using a variety of different tools, but having a really bright team internally who could bring all that together and make sense of it and say, right, actually, you digital team over here think these are your kind of top 3 territories. Well, actually 2 of them aren't, but one of them is. Here's the big picture. Let's bring it all together. And we're going to go after these, these 4 or 5 regions are going to be where we're going to focus our cash efforts on, because ultimately this all comes down to cash and making money, bringing more money in than goes out. So yeah, that was the best example that I've seen that done really, really well. As many tools you can, GWI, SimilarWeb, as you've said, your own Google Analytics, social platforms like Amplify or Sprinkler. You can get a ton of data out of them, but you've then just got to have that internal team, really bringing it all together and everyone getting on the same page and saying, right, this is the direction of travel. This is our business goal. Our overall business goal is this, based on all of this research that we've done. These are the top 3 territories or 4 territories that we're going to target.
And that's really insightful. And I think that's easier said than done, though, isn't it? To try and bring the business all in the same direction.
It's an enormous amount of work, and it was remarkable to be even a small part of that. Certainly from the digital side, as a consultant who'd been brought in to sharpen up and generate some money from content, which was ultimately the role I was there to do and did. That was a very small part of it. But when you put that part with all the other kind of 11 or 12 parts of the organization, and you see it brought together, I remember that meeting well, in the Roma office over in Rome. Just wonderful to see. This all now makes sense. Everything kind of makes sense now because we can see it. We're combined and we're collective. And again, it goes down to communication, right? There was some really good people there who would involve people, and the internal comms were very, very good. And you can get there, but unfortunately, in a lot of organizations, it still is siloed working, and that doesn't happen.
But yeah, that 100%. It just shows as well, like from when we were younger, if we do football still, I might move on to NFL as well, because they've obviously brought the product to Wembley as well. But when we were younger, the summer tour was probably more about a piss up and going away and just getting ready for the season, right? So you had, as time evolved and we get to maybe David Beckham's era, like United are traveling to Asia to grow the Man United brand, right? And what we've seen in the last couple of years is United and Arsenal going to America, to the USA, to try and build the brand there, having like Premier League fixtures. We had the botched 39th game, if I remember rightly, from the Premier League, which was again to bring the Premier League to another country to grow the brand, right? So you do have like traditional football fans, whether it's about the football, that probably look at this obviously negatively, that you're in it for the money, which is what the evolution of sports marketing is now. Like you've got foreign ownership, and I guess the thing is it's just to try and grow the base like even more so. But yeah, I think that's definitely kind of a shift that we've seen in time to try and grow those audiences outside of kind of your home country.
Definitely. It's got to be done in the right way as well. You think back to, it's only, what was it, 3 years ago with the Super League, and the backlash that had, right? That was not wanted. Yeah. Fans understand that, there aren't just fans in, certainly English football fans, there aren't just fans in England of a club anymore. You go to Old Trafford, you go, there was a piece the other day with a lad, I think it was from Korea, who had come over with his mum to go to Old Trafford, and he'd watched, he'd flown thousands of miles and he'd saved up all of his cash and whatever. And when he gets to Old Trafford and you lose again, that you was it four you haven't won in 40.
I was going to say, I assume it wasn't a good trip, but
yeah, but that what an amazing fan, right? And
yeah,
he's not less of a fan because he lives in Korea. All right, he can't get to Old Trafford every week, but it doesn't make him any less of a fan in my eyes. And similarly with Arsenal, when I go, there are loads of there are lots of tourists you can see from what's being purchased outside the ground and in the club shop. Like there's certain things that are more appealing to fans who are probably not your London-based fan, for example. I think most fans understand that you need to make money in sport. Sport is a business, but it needs to be done in the right way. Nobody wanted the Super League. That was very, very clear, because with the Super League, when that all kind of came about, and I was pleased that half of me, you want your team to be at the table with the discussion because you don't want to be left out of something that is new and should be debated. Absolutely. Was it the right thing? I was against it. I think most people were. I think it's borne out that the bulk of people in sport, in football, are. But you've got to, with anything like that, you've got to understand what the fans want. Where does it go with something like the Super League? Where does it go afterwards? You bring that kind of closed shop scenario together, and then when the clubs get bored of that, or there isn't enough money being made, then where do you go? Do you go to like a global league? How does that impact fans, like traveling to games? The cost to get to games in England is a hell of a lot of money. The cost to get to away games, the airlines are going to cop on, the hotel industry will cop on and go, oh, actually, Man United are going to go and play Roma this weekend. Flights from Manchester to Rome are going to go up. It's what happens.
Yeah.
We see this in travel all the time. So anything like this needs to be done. The fans are still central to this. Without the fans, you don't have, none of this works without the fans. The stuff on the pitch is the most important thing that happens, right? Take everything else away. If you're not successful on the pitch, nothing else works. But the fans are a central and core part to this. They are there through thick and thin. Football fans definitely are there through thick and thin. You look at clubs like Leeds, clubs like Man City, who have been up and down over the years. City obviously been massively dominant in the modern era, but prior to then they were getting 30k at Main Road when they were in the second and third division. Leeds still getting huge gates. We've got to look after the fans. We're doing it for, all of this is for fans ultimately, wherever they are.
Yeah, in an ideal world, I do agree with you with it, and hopefully it is always for the benefit of the fans. In terms of measurement, and like, how do you sell into like a chief financial officer or to a CEO about what the benefits of this partnership will be? So, and you've touched upon a lot of things earlier on about say like a feed and an ambassador, that you've got somebody that's got so many like brand partnerships, so someone like Cristiano Ronaldo. But when we first started watching football, like you had the likes of JVC as a front sponsor for Arsenal, you had Shark for United, you had Crown Paint for Liverpool, right? So there's that brand salience that I remember.
Yeah.
Given that I am bombarded with stuff, I can't really remember who Man United sponsors were prior to TeamViewer. The only reason you reminded me of TeamViewer is because we spoke about it before the episode. So how would you sell in terms of the financial benefits to the business? Like, how are you going to measure this over a 2-3 year period? And in terms of that brand salience and how I can associate a brand with a particular category. So like the Crown Paint, I still remember it from Liverpool's front of shirt. So how do you sell that in, and how do you measure things with sports marketing?
In terms of how we might measure that, I think it again comes back to what you're trying to achieve from your overall business goal. So typically it's either brand awareness or it's some sort of conversion metric. We want people to buy something or do something. Now, with some of the social tools, you can quite accurately estimate how many people you're going to drive from social to a landing page through using some paid media. Not on every platform, but certainly on the meta platforms, there's a decent degree of accuracy there. Now, what you can't predict is from the client side, once as a digital marketing agency or brand, you've launched your campaign, you've pointed people to that particular website. If the offer's no good, people are going to drop off.
Yeah.
So you're not going to convert. So your offer, a brand, a sports brand, can deliver traffic directly to a brand partner website via social, via paid search, whatever. But that offer needs to be really, really good and compelling. It needs to be a good user experience. Can I, are you, what you've kind of advertised to me, can I get through that next step really, really quickly? Is it seamless? Does it work really well on mobile? Is it clunky on mobile? If it's clunky on mobile, I'm probably going to drop off. So again, the communication thing, the trust between both sides, building the rapport. from sports org to potential brand partner, getting that all really joined up, you can measure that. You can measure all of that, and there are ways that you can forecast how many people will certainly see the ad, but then potentially click through as well to that brand partner site. So you can do all of that, and there's again some interesting work with Roma. I did some work with FIFA on that side of things as well. From the brand awareness side, it's obviously a little bit trickier to measure because you might want to take into account what you could probably do. And again, we did this at Virgin. We set up a brand tracker. So it was a quarterly brand tracker where a panel of people would be questioned on their familiarity with the Virgin brand, certainly the Virgin Bet brand in sports betting, and Virgin Casino as well, and Virgin Games, all the gambling brands that were associated to Virgin. Now, with something like brand awareness, you could measure something like, a metric like impressions, but impressions for me are always a little bit vague, and are the ones that it's a metric that still seems to be quite popular with commercial teams because the number is always enormous and can be sold in as a big figure.
Yeah,
I think as younger, more digitally savvy marketers ascend the ranks and become the marketing directors and CMOs of tomorrow, they're going to start looking into the data like you and I would, where impressions, I mean, I tell clients today, I'm like, look, have your impression figure, but it would be towards the bottom of the ones that I would look at. I want to look at engagements, and by that, I'm looking at likes, comments, shares. I'm looking at retention rates and watch time on video. So if I've got a 2-minute video, I want to see the 25% completion rate, the 50%, the 75%. I mean, it's very rare you get 100% completion rate on anything, very rare. But 50 to 75%, what's that looking like? What's the drop-off rate? Where are people dropping off the most? Why are they dropping off? Is it the way the content's filmed? Is there something that's been said that's put people off? Is it just too long, or people just zoning out a little bit? So looking into those deeper metrics from that brand awareness perspective, I think is more important, alongside something like a brand tracker, where you've got that consistency. So as long as I think the key thing with anything that you're measuring, as long as you have a model and you are consistently comparing apples with apples, and you're not taking a piece of data from one particular program, application, system, analytics tool, and comparing it with a different analytics tool, because all these tools kind of measure things in slightly different ways. So where I've had the most success is taking from the native platforms. So download your XLS files from X and Facebook and Instagram, wherever else you want to download it all from. Then use an analytics tool like a Sprinkler, like an Amplify, one of the best in breed ones. Establishing some benchmarks as well. So again, you can go back to AS Roma. There was a really smart launch of a brand partnership with Toyota. So they came on board as a big partner, sponsoring the training kit. And the ownership and some of the directors wanted to understand how did this stack up compared to other recent sponsorship launches in Serie A. So we looked at a couple that Milan had done, a couple that Juventus had done, a couple that Lazio had done, obviously being a local rival to Roma. And again, using a combination of these tools, we're able to then say, right, benchmarking the last kind of 12 months, AC Milan achieved this, Juventus achieved that, Roma were kind of here, and like you've outperformed in some areas, and in other areas you've underperformed. But here's the big picture. Again, it's that big picture. Benchmarking is essential for all of this as best you can. So that would be the way that I would do it. Understand the business goals. What are you trying to achieve? Typically, it's brand awareness or some sort of conversion campaign. Typically, certainly in sport, we want people to do something, take an action. Try and get some benchmark data in. If you haven't got any benchmark data, make sure you record absolutely everything from this campaign. And when you come to do it again, you can benchmark against that, that first campaign. Because, and again, this seems like quite simple advice, but it's amazing how many people don't do this still.
Yeah.
They don't establish those benchmarks.
Great stuff, Mark. So we're seeing the integration of the likes of AR and VR in sports marketing. I'm sure many people saw on LinkedIn, in I think it was in the US, this enormous screen of, I think it was a game at Old Trafford, where you kind of look like you're experiencing the game in like a bar or somewhere, but it looked like you were at the match, right? So you've got that as the, well, I'm sure will start to grow, and it wouldn't be a digital discussion without mentioning AI and how brands and sports teams are utilizing AI. I mean, the opportunities are endless. One example could be that you get your favorite player to send you a birthday greeting that is purely customized based upon your age, who you are, like your name, and therefore they don't have to have a direct recording. It's done all via AI. What have you seen that's impressed you from AI integration within sports marketing, and if there's any examples of AR or VR that you've seen that you'd like to highlight?
So I think if we take the AR example first, go back to the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. So I was working with an agency running all their work with FIFA in the run up to that World Cup, and there's a FIFA launched an app called FIFA Plus. FIFA Plus was largely a place where you could go and consume all sorts of different content, from live matches, certain live matches, to archive content, series content, etc., etc. But what they also had as part of that app was the FIFA Plus Stadium Experience. That was what it was called at the time. It might have changed since then, but effectively, it allowed users of the app to watch matches like they had never been able to before. So there was a live augmented reality overlay of stats, there was heat maps, there was insights, different camera angles, there were VAR replays, which were the same ones that were being shown on TV, and a whole load more stuff. But it was designed to complement and enhance how people in the different stadiums in Qatar were watching the game. So you can imagine pitch, you're watching, but you'd hold your phone up and a little digital overlay would come up on your phone and you'd be served this information. Now,
just for me, that sounds an awful experience for somebody that just wants to watch the art of football. But I understand, like, it is the way it's going. But I just can't even imagine. You can even get a headset on and like be looking all around things.
I think the natural evolution for something like this is glasses.
Yeah.
Potentially even longer term, you look at some sort of contact lens, something like that. Now, again, this isn't going to be for everyone, but clearly there was enough. You know, again, going back to my days at Wembley, a lot of people would question this sort of thing, this kind of fan engagement style, because the most important thing that is happening should be on that grass. Anything else is just noise. But I think we have to be very aware that attention, and how certainly younger people, and not even necessarily, you know, the 20 somethings and the teenagers, it's probably even, you know, the 30 somethings and maybe even our generation, you know, the 40 somethings, we're not consuming full sports events in the same volume as we were maybe 10 years ago or even 20 years ago. You know, there have been a few matches played over Christmas that Arsenal have been involved in, and again, just due to family commitments and time, I've not seen all of those minutes that Arsenal have played. I've seen all the highlights, I've seen all the goals, but I'm consuming content in snackable bite-sized form rather than sitting down and committing. It's not even 90 minutes, it's 2 hours, right? With half time and with injury time and all the added stuff around it. It's 2 hours. Football match is 2 hours pretty much. So what's interesting is the again, the consumption of sport is changing undoubtedly, and a lot of these sports are having challenges, right? Golf being one of them. It takes a long time to complete 18 holes of golf. Football 90 minutes, rugby 80 minutes. There's just a lot of minutes in these sports events, and you're now seeing the rise of shorter form types of sport coming to the fore. So if you look at the way that Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy are developing, and this is going to be on TV like imminently, like later this month. The Tomorrow Golf League is really going to show some innovation. They've just done a deal with Sky Sports, so that will be on Sky Sports, I think, from this month, if I'm right, and from January. You look at the rise of the Kings League. So if anyone is unfamiliar with what Gerard Piqué is doing with the Kings League, that is absolutely fantastic. It's effectively teams of influencers and legends who are streaming the content on their own platforms, and that the audience, people watching these matches, are able to influence what is going on in the games. So if you think, this will probably make you laugh, Andy, but years ago when Wenger was still the manager of Arsenal, he got laughed at a little bit by this, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility. He said that one day in the future he could foresee a moment in time where people watching football matches could influence or could pick which subs would come on. And he said that, and a lot of people are like, that's mad, it's never going to happen. But that is already happening in franchises like the Kings League, or events like the Kings League. The audience participation, people want to be part of the experience, and that is that is one way that it could happen. So yeah, for anyone out there who's not seen it, Kings League, have a little look. It's exceptional. Piqué is a wonderful ambassador for football. He understands how digital can enhance the sporting experience. He is onto an amazing thing there. Definitely look at that. Look at what Woods and McIlroy are doing with their golf, their nascent golf franchise. And I think we're going to see more short form versions of the game. You could certainly see, well, I can certainly see a time in the future where potentially football matches become 60 minutes. And they are timed to 60 minutes, and the 90 minutes goes away, and it might be smaller pitches, and it might be fewer players on a pitch. But will there still be, in 20 years' time, 90-minute matches to the level of popularity that they are today? I think they're still going to exist. I'm confident of that. To this level, will there be new things coming in, shorter, smaller sided versions of football or other sports? I would not be surprised to see that happen. In terms of AI, just to finish up on AI, AI is really interesting. I've got a lot of friends in the creative industry, so artists, illustrators, graphic designers, really, really super creative people who are worried by the advent of generative AI. You've seen, everyone watching this would have already seen multiple examples on their social feeds of AI generated video content. Even go back sort of a year or so ago when the hands on some of these figures were always a little bit of a giveaway there. That's been generated by AI because you got six
spaghetti eating, wasn't it? That was
six fingers or sausages, whatever it was. But it's getting more sophisticated. You can see where it's going. There was there's lots of, Meta a couple of days ago have announced that they're going to be allowing people to create AI kind of accounts. You can form your own AI account on Instagram and Facebook. They're going to allow that. That was in recent days. Whether or not that goes through, I don't know, because they do kind of tend to change their mind on this stuff a fair amount. But I think AI, you've got to get on board with it because it's not going away. it's only advancing. It's not a new thing. The advancements in AI certainly have been leaping forward at a dramatic pace in the last sort of 2-3 years. Everything that OpenAI are doing, and Google and Musk as well. But I would love to see it used to remove some of the. I really don't want human creativity to be diminished and disregarded in favor of everything going AI, and just a series of prompts creating the future of creativity. I think it should complement for sure, and I think AI can be used to reduce the amount of just laborious tasks that we all hate doing. You're creating spreadsheets and rules for spreadsheets and anything that can just reduce complexity and make life easier via AI. I'm absolutely all for, but I would hate to see the creative side, storytelling, writing, creating amazing imagery and art. There's something that comes from in here, right? That's inside the human soul. There is going to be a place for AI generated content for sure, but I would hate to see a point in the future where we are leaning more towards AI than human creativity, because I think that'd be quite sad, really. It's lovely just seeing stories created by people.
This is the fundamental issue, and I actually touched in the last video with the Lionel Messi example about having somebody talk about Lionel Messi that has experienced him playing football, seeing his goals, rather than like going to ChatGPT or some other generative AI that would output like result of training data to you to meet what you're asking. And it's like, well, if you get the same same answer, does it matter? When it really should. Like, to go back to your hero Dennis Bergkamp, when he scored for Holland versus Argentina with that unbelievable goal, like, you have to see it, and you have to talk to Barry Davis's commentary. That's what makes us human, to be alive, and you want to get that back from a human story rather than AI producing this. So I'm 100% agreement with you. Now, it's not just in sports. Like, you see that, we can cut costs from content writers here because we'll just do this. But the personality and the experience and the emotion matter.
Absolutely, mate.
I'd love to just run through and get to run through some of your experience on is with Roma. What were you brought in to do, and like what type of strategy did you deploy and how did you execute it? I obviously don't want to go into so much detail for you, but like, I'm very keen just to see also what you were doing there and how it inspired you. I mean, you and I grew up on James Richardson sipping espresso, reading the Gazzetta del Sport on Football Italia. Like, why Roma, and what was the kind of experience that you had there?
So Richard Ayres and Lewis Wiltshire. So Richard Ayres was the founder of Seven League, and Lewis Wiltshire was one of the high ups at Seven League at the time, and is now running the digital team at IMG, following Seven League's acquisition into IMG. I got a phone call from Richards asking if I'd like to be part of this project. I think this is in 2022, and I just immediately said yes. Again, goes back to days on News UK, right? Say yes, cool stuff gets offered, just say yes. And Richard and Lewis are wonderful people to work with anyway, so it was a no-brainer. But as you say, growing up, what was it, 1990, something like that, when Football Italia was on Channel 4, and thinking back to the days of Batistuta and Totti, 2001, like that title win for Roma. It was a great opportunity. It was brought in effectively to work with the digital team at Roma to monetize content first and foremost, and to kind of shape the content strategy as well. Roma have done some wonderful content over the years, going back probably 10-15 years. They've had some unbelievable people working at the club. They've had changes of ownership as well, and people have kind of come in and gone out again. And one of the key things was to help map out a little bit more of I guess a little bit more of a broader content strategy, but certainly can we help monetize their content? And that was a fascinating challenge. We wanted to, we were tasked with bringing in revenue from content and working out a partnership strategy. So again, this was all through IMG. So I was contracted by IMG and was running the work with Roma, and a wonderful kind of 15, 16 months. I'm still in touch with a lot of the guys at Roma, and people who I worked with who have subsequently moved on, still in touch with them. But we had to embark. I had a really lovely team at IMG working with me on this, and we had to embark on, I think we analysed something like 3,500 different pieces of content that they pushed out on social over the previous season. And we created a model whereby we would score this content. We used a few tools. We used Blinkfire, as I mentioned before. We looked at all the data from the native platforms, so Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, everything else. Pulled it all together into a massive spreadsheet, and we started to pick out different formats that we thought made sense to be packaged up to potential commercial partners that could be sold. Everything from, some of it was quite basic and straightforward, which a lot of different clubs do, but like a team sheet, for example, or a goal graphic. But we had some other really nice moments. And again, going back to that trust element I've spoken about a lot today, the Roma digital team had excellent relationships with the players. So, the likes of a Pellegrini or a Cristante or a Dybala, for example, big name players, important players for Roma. The digital team were able to get a mobile phone to them and get them to record a message down the phone direct to the Roma social audience. Now again, this is a couple of years ago, right? So this is quite common now. Like Arsenal, Tottenham do this a lot, but at the time there weren't a ton of clubs in football doing this, and we were able to devise that particular one. Was quite a highly engaged piece of content, because it was almost as if the player was speaking directly to you. It wasn't a quotes graphic or a piece of video where a question was being asked. It was the player speaking down the lens directly to that particular group of followers. And we came up with probably about 12, maybe 14 different formats that we then scored. We based it all on previous engagement from the prior season, and then engagement on what we had so far in that current season, 22-23. And we were able to attribute, based on market rates and other insights that we were able to glean from different technology partners, and obviously IMG itself being one of the biggest sports marketing agencies in the world, has big experience in the sponsorship space. We were able to put some numbers against these formats, and they were able to be taken to market by Roma's commercial team. And I'm pleased to say that the task that we were set, i.e. bring in decent money, we achieved. I obviously can't go into the economics of it all and share any of that, but it was a good, healthy amount. And to this day, they continue to have some really smart partnerships. They continue to make money off content, as far as I'm aware. So that was it in a nutshell. There's obviously a lot of advisory stuff around, how should, are we, in terms of the digital team, what else could we be doing? So you're exploring different channels. The growth of TikTok. There was a guy. He's now left Roma. He's moved on to another club. But he was a TikTok specialist and was an unbelievable hire for them, and was growing the channel really, really well organically. We were able to work with him and the rest of the digital team to basically bring in some paid strategies for TikTok as well, where we would target those key territories that I talked about before, that the bigger picture was, right, we've got a lot of followers over here, but actually we need a few more over here to ladder up to that overarching business objective. So we're able to kind of help shape some of his thinking, some of the content there. as well. So it was a fascinating project. As I say, it was originally a 6-month engagement for me, and it turned into 16 months. The contract got renewed a couple of times. Really, really great people there. It was wonderful to be able to go out to Rome on a few, I think 3 or 4 different occasions, spend days and days out there with the team. Didn't deal with any of the players at all. I'm not here to do that. I'm not really interested in any of that. That's never really been my thing. I like to do the strategy side of things, and let the digital teams kind of do all the stuff with the players. The players don't know me. Again, goes back to that trust thing. If I'm a new person turning up and I'm trying to speak to Paulo Dybala, for example, he's like, well, who's this guy? Like, I don't know him. I know Emanuele. I know Francesco. Like, those are my guys. So they should be doing that, leave that to them. But you can help advise and direct and structure ideas in a certain way. And then the people on the ground can go and deliver those ideas. So it worked really well. And as I say, some really good friendships there. I'm hoping to get out there next year to catch up with a couple of them anyway, just because we are friends now. And a real career highlight for sure.
Yeah, the city's amazing. I actually think it's my favourite city there. I was finished in terms of I used to work with Alitalia, and I'd fly out quite a bit to Rome, but their office was at the airport, so it's pretty depressing to fly in. And so I used to just go into Rome anyway, and honestly, taking the site. I mean,
if you ever get a chance, it's one of the greatest cities in the world. But if you ever get a chance, if you've never been to the Olimpico, if you ever get a chance to go to the Olimpico to watch Roma at home, it doesn't even need to be a big match. Any match, I've seen them 2 or 3 times at the Olimpico, and the noise, the atmosphere, it's the best atmosphere I've ever witnessed in football. It just dwarfs anything else. The fans are absolutely, passion is not a strong enough word. They are just beyond any level of passion you've ever seen. It's just a wonderful experience. Really friendly, very tribal, but friendly. Like, there's no edge to it. It's just a good, upbeat atmosphere. It's reasonable as well in terms of the cost of watching, a team like Roma. If you're in Italy versus like a comparable Premier League side, the cost is reasonable. So I'd encourage everyone to, if they're in Rome, do go and see Roma. Don't go and watch Lazio, go and watch Roma.
Mark, that's perfect. Listen, thank you so much for the discussion. It was super insightful. I mean, we've covered, I did try and branch out from football, but it was an unbelievable insight into the world of sports marketing, the evolution, your experiences with some of these brands and the campaigns that you've built out, the measurement. So I really want to just say thank you so much for making the time to chat through. I'd love to have you back on in the future, especially to talk about, we didn't get into gaming and in terms of sports marketing within e-games. FC25 is obviously a huge money maker as well. So yeah, I'd love to have you back on and even talk about looking ahead at the FIFA World Cup in 2026. But yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
And yeah, I'll see you soon, mate.
Thank you for having me. Take care.